Hello, everyone, and welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone. Today, we have a monthly tradition. I've got the decks for, 6 of the top 5 players on the Infinite leaderboard in the last season. I'm also going to do some predictions on where I think the meta is going, what decks I think will be the best in this coming season. We also have giveaway winners and so much more. So make sure you hit that sub button, hit that like, hit that comment. We do 7 days a week of videos, at least 3 brand new decks every single weekday. We haven't missed a day in well over a year at this point. So if you want the best and the most consistent Marvel Snap content, please hit that sub button. In addition, we do a giveaway. We do like 10 season passes at the start of the season, and then we give away 1 a week for the rest of the season. So we have our second set of 5 winners. I'll tell you how to enter the giveaway for the rest of the season in tomorrow's video, where we're going to take a look at Ajax. So our winners are listed on the screen. If you are Maximilian Morales, Rich McGregor, Logan SJBC, Ninjino, or Torinoshi, please shoot me a message the way it says at the bottom of the screen to claim your season pass. If you have the season pass, you'll just get a gold pass, unfortunately. But that's the trade-off. So if you won, congratulations, please shoot me a message. All right, so the top 5 players' decks of June were Yunity was number 6, a whole 16 points behind Payaba, and I could not find Payaba to save my life. I spent quite a while looking for Payaba, so we're going to look at Unity's deck instead. We've also got a Nownoos deck. Nownoos is another player who shared the deck. Unity and Nownoos played fairly similar lists. Tanjo, always near the top of the Infinite leaderboard, finished in number 3 after finishing number 1 last season. Sorry, I guess the season prior in the May season. While Caizer finished number 2, both May and June. Caizer is one of the only 2 players that hit 10,000, and Caizer was also more or less tied for number 1 in December with the number 1 player of June, Zoons. Zoons, look, everyone else is bunched within 200-300 snap points. Zoons is over 500 snap points ahead of everyone else. He had an absolutely dominant and incredible season, so we're going to look at the decks that all of these players played. We're going to begin with Unity, who you can find on Twitter at Unity0919. Unity is in the Asia server, and Unity's deck that was shared, the climbing deck, was Cerebro 3. This is a Cerebro 3 that's specifically anti-Arishem. We've covered this here on the channel. It was rank 7 when we did. It finished at rank 6. So fundamentally what this deck does is it has a regular Cerebro 3 game plan, right? Where you just play Cerebro and Mystique and you make all your 3/7s, and that's usually enough power to win a lot of lanes. Sentinel makes it so that you always have 3s. Quake and Scarlet Witch sort of mess with bad locations in a way that benefits you. You have the control pieces of Cosmo and Shang-Chi along with Invisible Woman to shake things up. But toward the end of the month, Arishem took over the meta, and in an Arishem meta, Darkhawk is amazing. You fundamentally never play Darkhawk unless the opponent's Arishem, where all you need to beat that matchup is Darkhawk and Mystique. And then Invisible Woman helps there also, because you just play Invisible Woman and Mystique on 2-3 against Arishem, and then on turn 6 you play Darkhawk. Darkhawk reveals as a bajillion power card, wins that lane. Invisible Woman allows Mystique to reveal, then copying Darkhawk for another 10 bajillion power. And then you just win the game. Very cool deck, very powerful deck. Props to Unity for coming up with it. Payaba is an Asian server player who I could not find literally anything about. I asked around. If anyone is on the Asian server watching this and is willing to help me out, if you're anywhere in the top 500 and play these players, please do drop me a line on any of those contact information ways that were found on that earlier giveaway slide. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, next up we have Nownoos. I'm not sure how to find Nownoos, but Nownoos is on the Asia server, and I wrote hell out when I don't know what the hell I was thinking, because this is totally Cerebro 3. This is a slightly different version of the same thing. This one doesn't do the Invisible Woman thing. Instead, it does a Juggernaut Cosmo thing. Juggernaut Cosmo being, if you have priority, you can chuck a blob into a Cosmo. Cool. You chuck a blob into a Cosmo and you win. The other big change here is US Agent instead of Shang-Chi. We're not running Iron Man. We're just saying the 28 power everywhere from Invisible Woman's enough. US Agent will take out 1 big lane. Mobius will make it so my opponent can overrun me with a bunch of extra cheap things. Very similar deck, very powerful still. I personally like the other version a little bit better, but hey, that's where we are. Alright, next up we have Tanjo. the great Tanjo, was on our podcast a few weeks ago talking about how to climb and how to play Marvel Snap at a high level. You can find Tanjo at twitch.tv/TanjoAnjo, and but he very rarely streams, so you're probably better off looking at Twitter for him. He's in the Americas server. Tanjo played Loki, a zoo that both he and Woody build, and then ended up with Husky's junk deck. So let's take a look at those 3 lists. The Tanjo Loki is the same list he finished number 1 on last season with. He kicked off the season playing the exact same thing. He tends to take a week off or so at the start of each new season, and then come on strong right after then, playing basically the same thing as the previous season. This was the number 1 deck of the previous season, which would be May. So this list finished first of May and then kicked off June in the meta that was still dominated by the Professor X Cannonball nonsense as this list. Eventually, things changed, and we ended up in a Gilgamesh meta for, I don't know, a brief moment right after Professor X, and this is the version that Tanjo ended up playing. It's a couple cards from the Woody version. This version is built to kill the mirrors with Super Skrull and Shadow King, which is just an insanely powerful end-of-the-game play. You basically want to get out all of your buffs and stuff early, and then you can use Super Skrull and Shadow King to just go, oops, I'm bigger everywhere than the opponent. It's a very strong and very cool list, and it's a mirror killer. This list still has a really high win rate if you check it out on any of the sites. No one's really playing it anymore, but it's not a bad list. Even against Arishem, it puts out a lot more points than it looks like. Next up, we have the list that Husky finished the season with and got to 3rd place with. Excuse me. This is the This Will Cost Me Cubes Husky Puppies list. So I found some weird thena junk list, and I went into Husky's chat and was like, huh, do you know where this is? And Husky was like, no, but I have this other list that's amazing. And like, I'm just going to tell you this straight up, no less than like 7 or 8 people have sent me this exact list within the past 3 or 4 days. This is now a meta list. It's a list you need to know. It's a list that's hard to win a lot of cubes with once you know what you're facing, but it is still extraordinarily powerful. This is when I was on my little kick of put Titania, White Widow, and Green Goblin and everything. So this list ends up being absolutely stellar. Basically, it clogs up the whole opponent board and uses what little space is left on the board to bounce Dagger around. So Dagger becomes like a 24 power card if you move her twice, with Iron Fist and Ghost Spider at the end of the game. And that's just usually enough to win a lane. And then you've got like Shang-Chi and Cannonball to win another lane. And that's just good enough when the opponent has literally no space to move, right? Dr. Octopus fills up one lane. The Debris, White Widow, Green Goblin stuff fills another. Magic gives you turns to get all your combos off and you win. This list is, again, freaking everywhere right now. It straight up eats, I'm going to say Alioth and mean Arishem. It eats Arishem alive. It is a super strong list worth checking out. Props to Husky Puppies for this literally like meta-defining list that ended up in 3rd place last season. All right, next up we have Caizer. Our friend Caizer, who's streaming every freaking day, is on the European server, and he played 3 different decks this season. He played Bounce, he played a Loki list, which is a Blink Loki list, and we'll talk about why that became the list. And then the Caizer Mover is what he played literally until today, when he was like, I think the meta has moved. So he started the season insisting on playing Bounce. This Bounce is specifically built to counter Cannonball Professor X, because Claw counters Cannonball Professor X. Everything else about this is relatively straightforward. It's running Sage over Hitmonkey, which is interesting because very often it wants to spend the last turn dropping a Claw, and you can't do that. But if you can drop that Claw and throw a priority, you're going to just win a lot of games of Marvel Snap. This list puts out an absolutely insane amount of power. This is like a no Bass bounce. It counters everything. This list is probably still really good. I should put it back together and play it. This was, again, though, specifically, the Claw here was specifically for Professor X being everywhere. When Professor X Cannonball was stealing games, Claw was winning major cubes from them, and it built Caizer a sizable lead into the top of the Infinite Leaderboard. At that point, the meta changed, and Gilgamesh decks became everywhere, so Caizer is not one to play the meta deck. He believes in countering the meta deck, so if the meta deck is Gilgamesh, then he needed to play what beat Gilgamesh, and what beat Gilgamesh was Loki. Loki saying, I've got the whole Gilgamesh package, but like all the cards are free, is just like winning, right? Mobius shuts down their Mockingbird, and then you just go to town. this version of the list through Blinken as an extra way to get Loki, and sometimes you wouldn't go after Loki, you would just go after a Devil Dino being an absolutely huge card in this list. That's it, nice and simple. Juggernaut, again, here can do the Cosmo thing if you have priority, where, like, it'll punch a Gilgamesh into a Cosmo. And then they still have a 5/9, but they don't have a 5/20, right? Which wins an occasional match, while Red Guardian can cancel a Blue Marvel fairly often, like surprisingly often. It's a good list. This is a very good list. This ended up climbing until the meta sort of moved on. And at that point, Caizer decided to go bigger than all of the other decks with this move list. I cannot play this move list. This is the only bounce list I've ever seen in Marvel Snap that I just cannot play well. It's bounce move. It puts out a ton of power. It ended up cutting Nico. There was never like a good replacement for Nico. It's been everything from Cloak to Daredevil to whatever else. What finally ended up killing this list is Dr. Octopus being huge in the meta. Doc Ock is in a lot of Arishem lists, and Doc Ock is in that Husky list that Tanjo played. So Doc Ock is everywhere, and Doc Ock absolutely ruins this list's life. This is all about like sequencing and ordering plays. It's extremely, extremely powerful. You end up skipping the first 2 turns fairly often, and then you just make a big card, bounce it, and then you make a second big card and do it. Hercules means that you need less bounce triggers, so it ends up working out really well. Unfortunately, Aranya and Madame Web are not out because that's one of those two is that Nico spot, and then you figure out if you could run one over Doctor Strange, and then you should have an incredibly, incredibly powerful list. Again, this isn't the right time for this in the meta, but this is what was used to end last season in the number 2 spot. Hey, you should check out some gameplay from these decks on the stream team. The stream team are our friends who check out a bunch of decks that we showcase every week. So if you want gameplay, the day of the video release, these videos are on Twitch, and then the next day there are videos about them on YouTube. So today is Sunday, so the King of Canada at 12 Eastern will have a look at these decks. There should be a video from FaThorNewman looking at last week's decks up soon, and tomorrow, Gregor2424 will have a bunch more lists. All right, so number 1, we have Zoons. Zoons is a 15-year-old from Taiwan, and he's an unbelievable Marvel Snap player. This is his second season in number 1, although technically he tied with Caizer last time. Zoons played a Sera Miracle at the start of the season, ran out to a huge lead, like genuinely huge, and then it sort of fell down, and then climbed back to first with Loki, fell down, climbed back with Zoo, and then like built an insane lead with this Surfer Hawk list toward the end of the season. So let's take a quick look. First, at the Zoon Sera Miracle, you should probably have seen this. Claw was in the deck until the Professor X nerf, then Claw became Ronin. The list was not as successful with Ronin. Everyone shared the Ronin version because Zoons only shared this one with me like a day or 2 before the Professor X nerf. But this version was more successful because Claw was the secret sauce to like stealing Professor X players' cubes when that deck was everywhere. Ronin ended up being in the list. Ronin was very good, but it wasn't as consistent. From there, Zoons went to a Loki list. This is very similar to the KM Best Loki list that he was playing for a while. You can see that I grabbed FaThorNewman's version of this. This is just our standard Loki, right? Like it's saying I can make Thena, Angela stuff big, right? And using Elsa, Thena, Angela, Kitty. Remember that Angela was still a 2-0 when this was played. And then when I don't see my early combo pieces, you just drop a Loki. Or when the opponent has the similar combo pieces and you can make yours bigger, Loki will cover the game. Remember, Loki was really, really great into that Zoo meta, and thus this became the list for a little bit. And then we have the Zunzu. This one, Aoi made a copy of it, and I grabbed Aoi's copy. This one flips between Alioth and Gilgamesh, depending on what's happening. There was a hot location, I don't remember which it was off the top of my head, that Zoons used and took advantage of with Alioth in the deck in order to get a bajillion cubes, and this won just a ton of games. Caizer was here because for much of the month until Alioth, excuse me, we keep calling it Alioth, until Arishem took over, Killmonger was one of the key meta cards. So Caizer was in the list. You could probably cut Caizer at this point, but this is still something you can do in Marvel Snap that is an extraordinarily powerful list. It is just saying I make things big, and then when you try and combo to get rid of my big things, Alioth wins the game. And finally, we have the number 1 deck. This list is just, in my personal opinion, right now, the best list in Marvel Snap. I still think, as of right now, it's at least the best non-Arishem list. It is a Surfer Darkhawk list. It can play into Arishem because it's got the Darkhawk and the Cosmo, and against everything else, Surfer just does not have terrible matchups. Surfer is quite good against Dr. Octopus. You should have priority if you can figure out where they're going to Doc, and you should be able to have at least a 50-50. You drop a Cosmo there and you can win. You can Nocturne off a Limbo and win that way. Mystique and Darkhawk is amazing. And hey, sometimes you're dropping Mystique on literally nothing and just saying, okay, I got a 3-2 for 2. Or sorry, a 2-2 for 2. It's not the end of the world. It's obviously not ideal. But look, you've got the full Darkhawk stuff, right? Like, you've got Korg and Rock Slide with Darkhawk. So you're completely freaking fine to just be like, I'll play an 11 power Darkhawk to end this game, right? I'll play an 11 power Darkhawk and Mystique. And I've got an 11 power Darkhawk and then an 8 power Mystique. And that's about as good as a Surfer fairly often. A lot of power to this list. More control than it looks like. Genuinely, I think this is the best non-Arishem list of Marvel Snap as of today. And that's why it finished number 1 on the Infinite Leaderboard last season. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. Oh, that shouldn't be here. Ignore the Patreon. You know what? We have a Patreon where we give all sorts of exclusive content. Later on today, people are always like, hey, can you do a weekly roundup of decks? Because I cover at least about 15 to 20 decks a week, right? So I don't really want people to be skipping all my daily videos to just watch the weekend videos. But there is a weekly video on the Patreon that is exclusive there, where I go over the top 10 decks of the week. I also have, there's just all sorts of exclusive content there. If you just join the $1 tier, one of the perks is that you can join all of our tournaments. So please check out patreon.com/snapjudgments. All right, top 10 decks to watch in, July, not May. I just don't know how to type sometimes. But top 5 decks to watch in July. So we've got decks. We've got an Arishem deck from Crazy, the Ekmati Can Best list, and then the Owie list. We've got a Bounce list from Comies and another one from Gnome. We're going to look at that Gnome one in more detail later this week. We've got a Good Stuff Mockingbird from Dexter, and then another from Spyro. Patriot BroodMe from Woody, and another Brood from Owie. And Sera Miracle from me and Den. And these are, in my opinion, the decks to keep an eye out for. The other decks, like Surfer, could easily be on this list, but Surfer was on the list last month, so I don't need to re-highlight it. That junk list is still going to be a meta force. I'm not re-highlighting things that were already meta. I'm trying to show you where I think the meta is going. Cool? So first we have Crazy's number 1 Arishem. This is literally the number 1 deck in Marvel Snap right now. Crazy was number 1 in both March and April and is back at number 1 with Arishem. He thinks Arishem is both fun and powerful, which should be terrifying to the competitive Marvel Snap community. You'll note Dr. Octopus here, Legion here for both scams, Super Skrull here so you don't get blown out by opposing ongoing stuff, and you'll also note a general lack of tech. This does not run this does not run Mystique. This does not run Absorbent Man. It is instead saying I run just Shang-Chi for the opposing Blob, for the opposing Darkhawk, and if that, I should be able to play around everything else. Hopefully Dr. Octopus does that work, or you can Loki and try and play their cards if you need tech cards. But I think it's a really, really great way to play the list. Or sorry, you can Goliath away their Darkhawk or Mystique and win that way. So there's a lot of ways to win. So if you can get Doc Ock down the lane, right, and you can win another lane, you should be able to figure out where Darkhawk is dropping, and at that point Goliath wins you the late game. Very, very cool list, very powerful. This is, again, the number 1 list of Marvel Snap. So this is the Arishem list that sort of ignores all the tech and answers to Arishem, just says I'm going to play better cards than you and win. Almost the opposite of that is the Ekmati version, which is, I believe, also the KM Best version, which has Echo and Mystique and Rogue and Mobius and Shang, and Goliath. All the tech cards in this list, as Arishem says, you can't stop me, I'm going to win. This has a really high win rate and is very powerful. We've seen this list so many times at this point. It still runs Darkhawk. Please note that Crazy cut Darkhawk, but this version still runs Darkhawk and just says, I'm going to win the mirror too. But Owie built this version that's got a high 60% win rate. This is a strange version, but it's working, so I don't know what to say. It should win the mirror, right? Because it's got the Darkhawk nonsense. It's got Rogue and Shang-Chi. It's got Mystique to copy Blob or Darkhawk. And then it's got Gwenpool, because sometimes you just draw weird crap, and Gwenpool on 3 says, all my stuff's just bigger now. Nick Fury gives you an extra chance at blobs, an extra chance at Goliaths, and so on. Whatever. I have no idea why this list is quite as good as the others, but it is, and thus it is worth knowing about and checking out. Please note, Mockingbird in all three, Loki in all three, Blob in all three. Those are the Arishem package cards at this point. Nothing else is, well, I guess Agent Coulson, but like no other high series card is really going to be required here. All right, next up we have Bounce. I've been playing this a lot, and this is very close. The Dr. Octopus stuff is giving this trouble, so if there's anything that happens to the Dr. Octopus stuff, this deck will be absolutely backbreaking. This is Komi's Bounce Pool. Fundamentally, what you're trying to do is play a nice early bounce game, and then you go Gwenpool into Grandmaster, and then you just have like this insanely explosive final turn. If you've got Angela, Bishop, Gwenpool, Grandmaster, and Sage, and then you can go Mysterio, you can also go Grandmaster and Beast. Either which way is fine. And then you can go Mysterio and Hitmonkey to end the game, or Mysterio and Sage to end the game. You just put out more power than almost anything. If the opponent's not disrupting you, this is like a combo deck that just goes super tall. Meanwhile, this deck is one we will talk about in a video later this week with a full breakdown, so I'll be brief now. Gnome is chilling around the top 40. He climbed like 20 ranks in Infinite with this. This list is insanely good. It's fundamentally built around Havoc being an 11 power card when you bast it and play it on turn 5. And since you have Hope and you don't have anything higher than 3, you're perfectly capable of just saying, I've got this power control thing going. Thena obviously gets really huge. US Agent is only good for another like day because Luke's about to be in 10,000 decks once Ajax comes out, but for the time being, this list is an absolute powerhouse. Next up, we have Thenapool. This is a okay. So we're gonna credit Spyro for this. So we don't know exactly who made it. I found this on Untapped, so did Spyro. If you know who made this list, let me know. I sent it around. No one had any real idea. Dubos absolutely destroyed with this list. This is a legitimate top-of-the-line list. It's basically saying I'm going to take out the Ravonna package and add Shang and Gwenpool, right? Hope gives you the extra energy to play things. This is another one we're going to do a full guide on within the next couple days because this list is insane. I think Gwenpool good stuff, more Mockingbird good stuff that often runs Gwenpool because Mysterio and Gwenpool are so powerful together is just really great. Dexter, another deck we're fully covering soon, reached the top 10 of the Infinite leaderboard and hit number 1 in the Americas with this Dracula dump list. Basically, what you're trying to do is turn 4 Gwenpool and then have a bunch of stupidly powerful ones to play on turn 5, get yourself a really cheap Sasquatch that you can play with a Dracula to end the game, and hopefully chuck that Infinite with that Dracula, and then you just dropped like just an insane amount of power, and you win. Because dropping insane amounts of power is how you win in Marvel Snap. I know you knew that, but now you know again. All right, next up we have Woody's Patriot. This is, so it's just Gwenpool works really well with BroodMe. That's what this list is. We had a version from Owie in Friday's video, I believe it was Friday's video, that did something similar. Didn't even bother to run Patriot, just said this is enough stats. But this deck is basically Gwenpool hits Brood, Absorbman, Iron Man that hits any of those, Mystique that hits Iron Man, whatever. You just win, right? Hits Mr. Sinister. You get the idea. Meanwhile, Mockingbird gets made cheaper by Mysterio, Brood, and Absorbing Man. Everything gets pumped by Patriot, and against Arishem, you've got Darkhawk. Sweet list, super powerful. Similarly powerful. Oh, I did decide to share it again. Look at that. It's the Owie IA Gwenpool. I had another version of this, but again, we're just saying Gwenpool goes really well with Black Panther, Brood, Nocturne, Mysterio. You can Forge into that. You can America Chavez into that. Nebula just sits there growing. You just have a ton of power, right? Like this list is saying I have a ton of power to drop. This one does the Mockingbird Sasquatch thing because Mockingbird is insane right now. Just like I think Mockingbird's the best card in Marvel Snap. But Gwenpool is a force to be reckoned with in this type of good cards shell. Finally, we're on to the Sera. This is Darkhawk Control. This might be a Revis list. I don't remember exactly who this is. I knew who this was, and I could not remember, but Den reshared it. I'm going to go with Revis, and someone can correct me, but basically this runs a regular Sera game, right? Except you have the Darkhawk package, so Darkhawk is again a good card, much like that Surfer list we looked at, except you've got the control pieces instead. So you're a little better into into Arishem if you don't get the combo off, while being a little worse into other decks. And I shared this list in my pre-gwenpool video, and this has got a 60% win rate in High Infinite and a 60% win rate in Marvel Snap Zone, so it's worth taking a look at it. This does not have bad matchups. You have to read the opponent, you have to be able to actively throw priority, but if you can do those two things, you are going to win lots of games in Marvel Snap. Serious advice, do not fall in love with playing Gwenpool. Sometimes playing Gwenpool is right, sometimes playing Gwenpool is wrong. She adds a lot of power. Look at your hand. If you know you're going to have to Shadow King a lane, then Gwenpool might not be worth it. You might rather get down a Mobius or an Elsa instead. Bishop gets really big here, Angela gets really big here. This list may want Luke Cage just so you can Shadow King more freely, but outside of that, this puts out a ton of power for a Sera list while not foregoing control with Shadow King and Shang-Chi, and I strongly urge you to give this list a try. Its stats are just really, really high right now. Questions of the day, and then we're done with this video. Hopefully you enjoyed that look back at the last season and my predictions for the next one. Kevin Bacon wants to know how much daily effort is to maintain a top rank. So I play for between an hour and 2 hours a day, and I chill around top 500. So apparently that's how much it takes. I know for a fact that most of the top Infinite players play about 4 hours a day, seemingly. Some of them play much more. I'm pretty sure Caizer plays much more. But not Caizer, excuse me. I'm pretty sure Zoons plays a lot more. But Caizer does a 4-hour stream every day and plays a little bit outside of that, just a quick game here and there for testing. But about 4 hours a day seems to be the, like, I'm trying to get top 100, while top 500 seems to be about 2 hours a day, and top 1,000 I was fine with when I was playing an hour-ish a day. That's, I don't know how it scales outside of that, and we're assuming a reasonably high win rate. Hi, Kev. Mandatory Burnout says Madeline Pryor did nothing wrong. Discuss. Alright. So, in the comics, Madeline Pryor did nothing wrong. She didn't know she was a clone. She married Cyclops, and he completely abandoned her. This was entirely Cyclops' fault. Madeline Pryor did nothing wrong. She eventually, through her own agency, ends up possessed by a demon, but she's in a very bad place, and you've probably heard this before, but hurt people hurt people. So she did. Totally fine. In X-Men 97, Madeline Pryor did extraordinarily, absolutely nothing wrong. She thought she was Jean. She thought her friends and teammates should trust her because she thought she was Jean. And she was in love with Cyclops because she thought she was Jean. And then, just because she found out she wasn't really Jean doesn't mean she suddenly stopped loving him, right? So they had a child together, right? And the actual Jean Grey didn't. She did nothing wrong. Madeline Pryor is a phenomenal character who generally, I mean, look, eventually, you know, the whole Hell on Earth thing, not ideal, but she does very little wrong. That Nick tosses a wildcard question. Anything I want to talk about, and so this is your chance to click off the video or fast forward a few seconds, because I'm going to talk about something political. I want to talk about political violence. So, I think that America is fairly likely headed toward some very serious political violence, potentially spreading the country. I think that type of violence already happens, but I think the widespread nature of it is going to really, really expand relatively soon. I'm going to begin with my only nonviolent solution that I've ever come up with that makes any sense to me. The only nonviolent solution to the continued degradation of fundamental rights, civil rights, equity, is unionization. America's political parties are largely funded by the extremely wealthy, and thus the extremely wealthy do whatever they want. The extremely wealthy own much of the media, which is built to further divide, and sow hatred. The only way to combat that you can't combat that as an individual, non-wealthy person. However, because of the way our political system works, a union can combat that. A large union creates a large voting bloc, which forces politicians to listen not just to their wealthy donors, but also to the people who will vote them out of office if they don't. You cannot do that individually, but a union can. In the American political system, nothing has ever changed without either violence or the threat of violence. That is not to say I want there to be more violence. This is not a desire for violence. but nothing changes without either the violence or the threat of more violence, whether that be things like the weekend or civil rights or work hours or children not being allowed to work. All of these things are changed by organized action that either uses violence or has the threat of violence behind it. Dr. King, who everyone likes to yell at about these things, both used direct action, but used the threat of violence, him being the non-violent choice, as a means to get change because the other option was violence. That threat of violence is necessary for those in power to not just say they do whatever they want. Every group, every era in history thinks that the violence of the past was both justified and necessary in certain situations, but violence in the present and future is too much. We have accomplished what we need to, and the status quo now, to those who are comfortable, feels like enough, and thus violence is too much. History does not look kindly upon that, because the violence of the past, when it leads to positive social change, is almost always lauded. This isn't easy and it isn't complicated, and I strongly suggest you to either unionize or otherwise organize if you wish to prevent this eventuality, but it is something that's going to happen in America going forward. You can respond to this, but if you're going to be hateful or ridiculous or completely ignorant and be like, and misquote people, please don't. Thank you. Certain tiers of support on our Patreon come with on-air thanks. I'm going to say thank you to Abigail Giesland, Manager Burnout, Cables, Irregardless, David G. Wingfield, Direwolf, LAB, FaThorNewman, Good Dog Gamer, This Is the Way, Inc., I Am Frostman, Jane Everett, Doomer, Prime Dryan, Kirtixley, Koire, Pyrophoros, The Goat Seeker, who I took 8 from earlier on an ego game, 10-Man Falcon, saw at Brookland, had an awesome time with. Great to see you, Denman. Quid Pro Joe, Doc D, King of New Marvel Snap Content, Fat Nick, Ginger Prime, Philip Brakovich, aka Ratcope, one of the 7 people who sent me that Husky deck, Haplo, Kenny Loggins of the Danger Zone, Rob Silverman, The Bizza, X-Force V and Skippy G, Tommy Nyquist, the winner of Snap Judgments League Season 1, The King of Bros, Black Dahlia, The Great Kazoo, Jessica Gamble, Ryan Wood, Woody, Kev C. Hoda, Luna Chris, Archangel 3K, John Q, Louis Antunes, Mod Supreme Models, Darth Tater, Remus Atala, Brian Kaufman, Tristan H. Martin, Jason B, J.D. McDonaldinho, The Fuzzy Dunlop, Spectrumix, Hoot, Matt H, DJ Mackie Hijinks, No Frickin' Flex, Ocularis, Mr. Craig Sterry, Seamus, Jonesy, Two Ties, who was also at Brookland and gave me the coolest Dragon Ball hat that my son did not wait for me to give him, claimed, and did not take off. The great Lauren Whatevs, the Pirate King Tuccrr, the Homie Min, and of course, Gunny T, where the T stands for. I hope you enjoy the game more soon, my friend. Final thought, I haven't read this in a while. This is my favorite quote. I found it in a book by Jorbs, the Slay the Spire streamer. I love it. It's one of my goals for this community. It's one of my goals for my life, and I like to share it every so often. So the quote is, but as an adult, I worked out that my real calling, the thing I wanted most, was to be a boat, which obviously doesn't make sense. People can't be boats. But we don't quite have the right words for what it is when a person is a boat yet, so that's the best I've got. I want to be a vessel for the excellence of others. I want to carry them to a place where they belong and provide shelter in the harbor for them when they need to rest. I want to endure storms and heat and cold while they are comfortable and safe below deck. I'm not so much a captain as I am its all. See you tomorrow for another Snap Take. Peace.